Okay, so I just kind of want to talk about, I guess, test studying, all that stuff. I've taken a bunch of exams, and each time I'm kind of trying to hone what I did last time and do better, I guess. And in doing so, I've kind of formulated a process or a method, or I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but I guess I'll just talk about it. So I'd say performance is made up of two things. One thing being studying, and so I'll spend the bulk of this talking about that, and I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So there's four parts to studying. I'd say first is initial exposure, and this is where you build the baseline knowledge, and I guess you establish the scope of what you need to know for the exam or just in general, and you try to catch the things that you might not come across in your own study. So essentially the point of this is to build the baseline knowledge, okay? Second part is going to be preliminary practice. So you can see a trend here. First component is learning, second is practice. So it's preliminary practice, and this is where you try locating the goals in your understanding by applying that foundational knowledge that you've just built from initial exposure. And this is typically in the form of a worksheet or homework. And here you want to try attempting a question first, but completely on your own. And then you're gonna fail. Obviously, you're gonna fail. You're gonna do bad on that question because, well, you don't know the material that well. that well. But that's okay, right? You're gonna after that you're gonna correct it with the answer key. You're gonna look at the answer key and you're gonna see how it's actually solved, and you're gonna look at exactly how that differs, and you're gonna do another problem. You can do the same thing. And it would really help if you have a lot of problems for this, okay? And so this kind of doing it yourself and trying to call on the information that you learned and try to remember, that's active recall. And so by the end of this, you'll still have a lot of questions. So you'll be like, okay, well, I don't understand a lot of this stuff. And that's where you go into another learning component. Like I said, learning, practice, okay? So you can go into learning again, relearning, and this is typically in the form of recitation. So where you have a professor or a TA or someone you can ask questions to. In some cases, you'll have to ask like ChatGPT or some AI tool or whatever else to help you understand the topics, maybe a peer or something. But yes, so here you want to gain the knowledge, you want to fill these gaps in your knowledge. And this is typically through a recitation worksheet or recitation, like I said. And then you want to test that knowledge, testing knowledge and recitation worksheet. And or you can use the Feynman technique to test your knowledge, really how well you know it. And the Feynman technique, I'm going to kind of simplify here, but just try explaining it as simply as you can, a process or a problem or a concept, as simply as you can. See where you don't really understand it and go back and fill those gaps. Okay, so within relearning, there's a kind of circular pattern where you answer your questions, fill those holes, locate more holes, fill those holes, locate more holes, okay? So even within the learning, there's learning and practice, okay? The fourth part, post-practice, okay? So here there's gonna be, again, learning, practice. That's the idea here. You're gonna have more practice, and post-practice is made up of 3 points. There's gonna be advanced practice where you compound the knowledge. There's gonna be spaced practice where you apply spaced repetition to try to retain the knowledge and commit it to more of your long-term memory, to retain the knowledge for a longer period of time, from when you learned it to when the exam day is and past and beyond, okay? And then the last part, which is mock exam practice, where you really prepare for the exam itself. All right, and those are the 3 components of post-practice. And in this step, if you were to locate more holes, you just go back to the other step, relearning, right? And you fill those holes. The third and fourth component have a circular relationship where you locate the holes in the fourth part and then you go back to the third part, right? Then relearn, okay? So now the next component, or well, the next thing I wanted to talk about, not the component, next thing I wanted to talk about is the ratio of these, right? You want to really know where you're spending time on, where you should spend time on, and where you should kind of move on quicker. In some courses, you're going to want to spend more time on the practice. It's very easy to learn, but you really need to practice it. Some courses, it's very obvious, but it's something you really need to keep in mind, also based on who you are. For me, I think for chemistry, I guess, I spent a lot of time really understanding materials, really getting them like locked in, but not as much time on the actual mock exam practice part, where I spend a lot of time with a time limit and stuff like that. So yeah, just that's an example, right? You be very aware. The whole idea here is efficiency. You want to do everything as efficiently as possible. And that brings me to the other part. This is going to be most effective when you're studying honestly, meaning for practice, when you're not supposed to be using the answer key, you're going to try it fully yourself, you're going to really put your heart and soul into it, whatever. You're going to really try it, honestly, that's what I mean. And then efficiently, as in spending the least amount of time possible. With the most amount of output, okay? So that's being very focused and whatnot. Maybe I'll have another video or maybe another segment in this video about that. But yeah, that's the idea, okay? So that's where you're gonna do the most of the studying. And so now that I've talked about studying, that's one part of performance. The other part of performance is the mind state. And the mind state is determined by 3 factors. One factor, health, nutrition, sleep, whatnot. Second factor being the actual I guess yourself. It's your mind state. Of course, you're gonna have a big impact on it. And the third part being others. Okay. So when I say yourself, I'll start with that because it's easier to explain. Yourself, self-doubt and test anxiety. Right. Really, just try to keep a level of confidence throughout the test. Don't let one problem's failures impact another. Your confidence on another problem of a different variety. Okay, you really gain nothing by losing confidence throughout the test, okay? It helps you in no way at all. And second guessing yourself. I mean, this is really me talking more to myself, to you, because I struggle with that a lot. And another aspect, the others part, in a lot of cases, either they're gonna know a lot less than you, and it's great, you're socializing, you're having fun with your friends, or maybe you're locked in, okay? But a lot of the times you're going to be teaching them a lot of the material. And yes, that might be effective in terms of maybe the Feynman technique, okay, relearning. But it's efficiency. You want to know when to do well and move on in the different components of studying. So yes, help your friends, but be very aware of how much time you're spending in the one component as opposed to another. And don't neglect the practice. So maybe at times the studying with friends is not the most effective. Also, before a test, if you're studying with people that don't know much of the material at all and you're trying to teach them and maybe they don't understand it, your confidence is going to be lost. You're going to be like, well, I tried explaining it, they don't get it. It must be me, that's at fault. I've fallen into this trap many times. But that's kind of why you don't want to study with other people. And let's say it's the other end of the spectrum, okay? Let's say they don't tell us, okay? In that case, they might introduce material to you without properly explaining it and you might feel like, whoa, I didn't know this was going to be on the test. I mean, is it going to be on the test? And then you start freaking out. You're like, I don't really know this stuff. And at the end of the day, the points you may gain from revising material with friends or peers before the test is not at all worth the points, not at all more than the points you may lose from the confidence lost. Okay? So I talked about performance, what it's made out of. Now let's talk about mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable, right? When you're performing, you're gonna fail. And failure is alright. Failure is only failure if you don't take anything out of it. Take away anything out of it, right? And so I'm a big believer in that, and I think to best understand what you take away out of it, you need to identify where you failed. And for mistakes, I'd say there's a spectrum. One end is raw knowledge mistakes. This is more entwined with the studying the first component and third component, the learning components, relearning and initial exposure. And then the other part, which is the other end of the spectrum, which is the application, the ability to apply what you've learned. And this is the second and fourth parts of the studying components. These are the post-practice and preliminary practice, okay? So these are the 2 parts. And so it's a spectrum of mistakes. On this end, raw knowledge, you can typically have fundamental knowledge gaps, mistakes, right? You're really not going to know the material, and that's why you failed on the question. The other end, you're going to have silly mistakes, maybe forgetting a negative, maybe forgetting the units, whatever it may be, messing up something stupid. And so that's kind of the spectrum of mistakes. There's many in between, but being able to pinpoint where it was on the spectrum that you messed up, you can see where, well, I need to spend more time on this component. I spent too much time here, I didn't spend as much time here. Maybe I did do it, but why didn't it help as much? Well, I didn't do it efficiently, right? This is how you pinpoint the mistake. Another huge factor is mind state. Mind state will kind of be impacting across the entire thing here. Again, that's another part of performance, and it's a decent part, okay? So yeah.